Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. This is part 2 of looking back at 2018. This is focusing on the year that was, more so general commentary about the year, the fights that we saw, ones that I particularly enjoyed, and I hope you'll wade in with ones that you enjoyed too. Some general comments about the division, because I think it's been on fire this year in 2018, but previously as well. We've had a couple of good years, and there's no let up in 2019 by the look of things. A couple of good fights already in the works. Kanelski, Washington, that's in January. Rivas and Jennings, that's in January, and then we've got Wallen and Caballero in February, and obviously there's Joshua fighting in April, potential Wilder Fury rematch. There's a number of big fights on the horizon, so that's very heartening indeed. But yeah, I'll talk about a couple of other things as well as we go. Buckle in, let's go. So in terms of the year, I think it was a very good year for the heavyweight division, a very good year. We didn't get everything that we wanted. There was no undisputed. A couple of other fights didn't get made, but on the whole, we saw a lot of good action. Just think, from earlier in the year to the end of 2018, there was almost something every month. I mean, we had Wilder and Ortiz, we had White Brown, Joshua Parker, that was a unification, Povetkin Price, Wallen Granat, Parker White, Joshua Povetkin, Kanelski Martin, Jennings Dimitrenko, Helenius Tepa, Hrgovic Mansour, Chisora Takam, Pulev Fury, Wilder Fury, and White and Chisora. And I'm sure there were some other fights as well that I could have mentioned. Those were just off the top of my head in terms of, the ones that stood out for me, and I'm sure you will have some of your own too. Overall, another very good year for the heavyweight division. We've seen some great fights. We've seen some great knockouts. There's really been some great action to look forward to and to sort of wade in and mull on over and look forward to in the future. 2019 will be no different. I've really enjoyed what I've seen this year, and obviously running a heavyweight boxing channel with lots going on, it certainly gives me a lot to do. Obviously, this is only a part-time gig, doing a video or two every day or, on most days of the week. It is a very enjoyable thing when you don't have to keep mulling over the same things time and time again. Obviously, there's a bit of that. Some things like the Wilder and Joshua negotiations, that dragged on for about 3 months in April to June 2018. But overall, there was always something new on the horizon that we could look forward to. And there was some sneaky good fights that were flying under the radar that were really good watches. And if you knew where to watch, where to go, you could watch some decent heavyweight boxing almost every weekend of the year. There wasn't too many weekends where there wasn't a lot of action, and that's great for the division and at large, and we've seen a renaissance in the past couple of years. A number of very big fights, a number of very big names coming to the fore, and heavyweight boxing, it's been back. I know a lot of people like to say, oh, the division, it's a bit weak, there's only a couple of guys, but actually even the top guys, they're vulnerable. And you could see the likes of Joshua, Wilder, Fury getting beaten by each other or potentially others within the division. And what I really enjoyed about 2018 as well was some of these other fights that I just listed before. I mean, you saw Kanelski and Martin, Jennings Dimitrenko, Helenius Tepa, Hrgovic Mansour, White Chisora Takam. A lot of these fights, they weren't eliminators. They were fights that just got made. So that was really encouraging. We saw a number of fights where guys really laid it on the line, and it wasn't just for a title shot. Too often we have too many guys coming through the division. You never really know how good they are until they step up, and sometimes it can be a step too far. And that step up can sometimes be in a final eliminator or a title fight. So it was really heartening to see. And money plays a part too. Some of these fights get made. And long may it continue. I really hope it does continue. And in terms of a general comment for both Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, we'll start with Joshua. Start of the year as #1 in the division. He's had Wilder and Fury chasing and nipping at his heels through the year. They've obviously had a public campaign to try discredit him, try win over some fans, but Deontay Wilder's made up some ground himself on Joshua with some of the fights that he's had. Deontay Wilder, before 2018, was in a lot of fights no one really wanted to see. So Luis Ortiz and Tyson Fury on his resume looks much better, and it strengthens his resume a lot. Before this year, it was looking a bit thin, but he's certainly padded it out now with some good names. And a couple more good names, couple more good wins on there. It starts to look like a really strong resume, one that can start to hold up against other guys from different eras. And Joshua himself, he's been extending his own legacy in 2018, unified with Joseph Parker, took his belt, and then took out one of the top perennial contenders in the heavyweight division, Alexander Povetkin. First man to knock out Povetkin, really brutal knockout, and that was a fun fight. And it must be said, if he hadn't have got that stoppage in the manner that he got it, that card overall would have been a bit of a disappointment, because the undercard was very thin, wafer thin, and that knockout sort of saved the night to some extent, because it was looking like a lot of people would have been a bit angry about it had it not been for that knockout, which just sort of papers over the cracks a little bit. So certainly for future pay-per-view events, they're going to need to put the hand in their pocket, splash out on some good undercard fights, because adding a whole bunch of fights, and this goes for any pay-per-view card, adding a whole bunch of fights in the week or two before just to fill it out, that's never a good look. So I hope that, the next big cards for any of these top guys, if they're on pay-per-view, that it is, because I'm certainly big for getting value for money from pay-per-view cards. I don't just watch the main event, and spend my money for that. I want to have some quality throughout the card, and if there's more heavyweight fights, all the better. And we did see a lot of that this year in terms of some of the Matchroom cards where, that July card, Joseph Parker and Dillian Whyte, initially when they first announced the card, it was looking a little bit thin, but then late on, but it turned out to be very good for the card. Derek Chisora and Carlos Takam, that was added. Great fight. And obviously it was one of those brawls, and Derek Chisora came back, knocked out Carlos Takam in stunning fashion, revived his career off the back of that one performance. It got him to a pay-per-view fight. And you had Nick Webb and Dave Allen added onto that card late too. Stunning knockout from Dave Allen, and that was knockouts galore on that card. All the lower weights, those fights, there were some stunning knockouts right through that card. And obviously the main event, Parker and Whyte, that was full of action, some controversy too. But in general, we saw some great fights. You'd have to say there's a couple of guys just not active enough in the division who I'd like to see more of. Dominic Breazeale, he wasn't in the ring often enough. Andy Ruiz, he only had, 2 fights this year. That came after having a year or 13 months off after his Joseph Parker loss in the end of 2016. Ruiz, he is suffering from some promotional issues. He stated as much on social media. He's not sure how it's going to play out, but he wants to move on from Top Rank. But clearly they don't want to relinquish whatever deal or control they have over his career at this point. But overall, we saw a number of the top guys come in, and I guess one guy who stood out for me later in the year was Charles Martin, a guy who got blown out in 2016 against Anthony Joshua. He was written off, considered a bit of a joke. He had some time off, obviously, was doing some strange things in his time off, a number of strange social media posts. If you saw them at the time, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then he comes back, faces Adam Kanelski. Many people wrote him off, but I thought Charles Martin, he can bang, and if he shows some heart, this could be a good fight. And it turned out to be one of the sort of brawls of the year overall. Kanelski, strong first 5 rounds, started gassing, Martin takes over. It really was a bit of a slugfest there. We saw a number of slugfests throughout the year. Obviously, Chisora Takam, that was another one. Another fun fight that I really enjoyed this year was Alexander Demetrenko and Bryant Jennings. And out of nowhere, Demetrenko floors Jennings, big right hand in the 4th round. So it was all on for young and old in that fight after that point. Demetrenko started to fade a bit, Jennings gets on top, and it was one of the more stranger knockouts in terms of there was an uppercut from Jennings, and the ref called it off before Demetrenko had even hit the deck. Very premature stoppage. And we have seen some of those in recent times. You might go back to that Giuseppe Quarterone in the Parker and Joshua fight, jumping in at any opportunity to stop them working on the inside. I mean, that was a bit strange and bizarre, but it was a different fight. It wasn't the fight we were expecting. It wasn't the war we were expecting. Parker and Joshua, a bit tentative, bit cautious, obviously not wanting to make mistakes, but when they did get on the inside, they were prevented from working. And that didn't just influence Joseph Parker, it also influenced Anthony Joshua. But I'd note, I mean, a lot of people say Joseph Parker would have won if he'd have been able to work on the inside. I'm a big Joseph Parker fan. I don't actually think he's got much of an inside game compared to a lot of other guys in the division. But Joseph Parker, he had a bit of a disappointing year. 2 losses on the trot to top of position. He can come back, and so can a number of other guys. And of course, this year we saw a number of prospects starting to rise through the levels, a bit further up the ranks, getting a bit more coverage, a bit more profile. You can think about the likes of Joe Joyce, Daniel Dubois, Nathan Gorman. Those British prospects got a lot of coverage, a lot of press this year. Guys like Tony Yoka impressing at times. He's obviously had a ban though. Filip Hrgovic, he's probably my prospect of the year, taking on some top opposition and winning them. Beat Mansour, knocked him out, and then beat Kevin Johnson later on. F.A. Ajagba, he hasn't faced great opposition yet, but he's shown flashes of his potential of what he can do. There's other guys been making a bit of noise. Vladislav Serenko sort of come out of nowhere to really sort of get a bit of attention in 2018. Alexander Teslenko as well. Peter Milas, he's another guy who really made some strides in 2018. Beat Kevin Johnson, beat Francesco Pianetta. Very unheralded coming into the year, but he's got some props from what he's done throughout the year. So he is a prospect to watch in the coming year, as are some of these other names here, you know, that haven't been getting as much coverage, but, you know, obviously sometimes sliding under the radar can actually be a good thing. Guys I'll be watching out for, and, you know, I'm sure there's going to be some names I'll forget here, but Bakodir Jalolov, Ivan Daichko, Michael Polite-Coffey, Alexander Zokozy, Kim Lundqvist, Guido Vianello, Aslan Makhmudov, and I'm sure there's some other names that I'm forgetting here, but there's just a lot of talent coming through right now, and some of the old guard, you know, we can expect a bit of a clean out in the next 12 to 18 months. Some of these guys who've been, and you can think of them, there's plenty of guys from sort of 33 to about 40 at the moment who've been hanging around the top of the division for quite some time. Some of them are past the best by date, and I expect there will be a clean out happening in the next 12 to 18 months, but I'll cover some of that in another video. Best comeback, Tyson Fury. That is a clear winner in terms of that category. I mean, you could also add maybe Dave Allen there. His career was almost dead and buried, but he came back with a stunning knockout to revive his career. And then obviously it took a bit of a beating against a lightly regarded prospect towards the end of the year. A lot of people jumping in saying, you know, should he quit or should he take his career more seriously, because he admitted he hadn't been training. But someone who had been training was Tyson Fury. After a couple of years out, really came back, did the business, and fought well against Deontay Wilder. Fought to a controversial draw, but certainly you can't underestimate what he did, where he came from, and how good he looked, considering the limited comeback fights, the limited opposition that he had faced in Sefer Seferi, who'd had a comeback of his own of sorts, Francesco Pianetta. They weren't great fights, but Tyson Fury, he came better than advertised, and certainly a great year for Tyson Fury. And all sorts of Tyson Fury fans coming out of the woodwork. That near win has propelled him into the minds of, you know, the boxing public in general, and from what I can see, he's certainly come back to the UK with a lot of glory. A lot of people are thinking very high of Tyson Fury, and it hasn't always been that way. A couple of other guys that have had good performances this year. Guy who came out of nowhere from cruiserweight to heavyweight, Michael Hunter. A couple of good late wins at the back end of this, the second half of the year in 2018. One against Martin Bakole, a very highly touted prospect who was favoured to beat Hunter. Hunter comes in there, gets the victory, and then he steps in at short notice against Alexander Ustinov. So he's one to watch for 2018. I won't get too much into it because I'll cover some of this off in one of my early videos for 2019. Another guy we'll be looking out for is obviously Alexander Usyk. He fought Bellew, and there's a potential move to heavyweight. He's been umming and ahhing a little bit. You'd have to wonder what there is left at cruiserweight for Usyk to do. Potentially an Andre Ward fight, we will have to see. There's no guarantee he comes straight up to heavyweight, but even then, he's probably going to have a couple of learning fights. The names of, you know, Povetkin, Takam, they've been mentioned for Usyk, even potentially Joseph Parker, although Joseph Parker's promoter says, don't know about that, don't want that fight just yet. I think Parker, he needs to graft a more careful path back to a title shot, because he's got some development that he needs to do. But I would like to see a couple of other guys next year in more action. Andy Ruiz Jr., as I mentioned. Izu Agono, he was due back in December, but his coach died in tragic circumstances. died in a house fire. So that was really sad for, Izu Agono. He had a very close bond with his Polish coach, Polish-based Nigerian Izu Agono. So that was a sad situation, but he will be back in action early next year. Rescheduled fight with Ali Aaron Demirishin. Dominic Brazil, need to see him fight again soon because he only had one fight in 2018. Eric Molina, he had some issues with medication that he was popped for. There's no suggestion that he was actually doping per se, but certainly he could have been more careful with what he did. And that is an excuse a lot of guys come up with in terms of, well, I didn't know this, I took this vitamin B12, I didn't realize this had something in it. It's just not good enough in this day and age to come up with that sort of tripe because you're a professional athlete. If you're buying something over the counter, you at least need to check the ingredients are not on the banned list. And you need to declare it straight up or check with someone. There is ways to do this in this day and age. It can all be done over the internet or with a phone call. Some of these guys just, have to be more careful. But in terms of the year that was, it was a pretty good year. I really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed your company on this journey throughout the Boxing Squared YouTube channel. We've gone through some significant growth this year. First 6 months of last year, because I started at June 30, 2017, ended that year with about 1,100 subscribers. So we're almost at a sevenfold growth for 2018, up to over 7,500 subscribers. And I thank each and every one of you, and even the people who aren't subscribed but often check out the channel, thank you very much. I appreciate everyone that comes to the channel, engages with the content. Hopefully you enjoy the content, and if there is something more that you'd like to see, just let me know. We'll see what we can do. But yeah, drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.